I never meant to stay this long. That was the first thought in my head when I realized the tea in my mug had gone cold. Clara sat across from me at the kitchen table, legs crossed, fingers idly circling the rim of her glass. The afternoon light came in thin through the blinds, striping her sweater with pale gold. She wasn't looking at me, not directly, but her eyes kept returning in quick glances, the kind you pretend are nothing until they start to weigh on your chest. Her hair was a little messy, pulled back in a way that didn't hide the strands that had slipped free. It made her look softer, not the sharp, put-together Clara I usually saw when I came over with Matt, her son, to hang out. Only Matt wasn't here today. He'd left hours ago for work, telling me I could stick around until the rain stopped. That was 4 hours ago, and the rain hadn't let up once. "You're quiet," she said, her voice low, like she was testing the air between us. I shrugged, not trusting my mouth to work without spilling something I shouldn't. Just listening. To what? I thought about saying the rain, but the truth was it was the sound of her breathing and the pauses between her sentences. I don't know. A faint smile tugged at her lips, like she knew I was lying but wouldn't press. She leaned back, letting the chair creak, and for a second I thought she might get up. Instead, she stayed there, studying me like she was making sense of something. It wasn't the first time we'd been alone, but it felt different now. The silence wasn't casual. It was full, crowded with things neither of us had decided to say. Her sweater sleeves slipped back as she reached for her glass, and my eyes caught on the thin silver bracelet around her wrist. I'd seen it before, but today it looked almost delicate, like if I touched it, she might pull away. "Do you ever?" she started, then stopped, shaking her head as if erasing the sentence. "What?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. Her gaze flicked to mine, held it for a second too long, and then she looked away. Never mind. I wanted to ask again, to push past whatever line she'd just drawn, but my chest felt tight, like I already knew the answer, and it was safer not to hear it out loud. The rain hit harder against the windows, the sound filling the kitchen until it was almost a curtain between us and the rest of the world. I realized then how rare this was. No interruptions, no Matt, no reason for me to leave. Clara took a slow sip of her drink, set it down, and folded her hands on the table. She wasn't smiling anymore. "Evan," my name from her mouth sounded different. Lower, steadier, like it carried a weight I wasn't ready for. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words got stuck somewhere between my throat and my chest. She tilted her head slightly, eyes narrowing in that way people do when they've decided to take a risk. "I've wanted this longer than you think." The words didn't just land. They rooted themselves in me. My pulse kicked, and I couldn't tell if I was leaning toward her or if it only felt that way because every part of me suddenly ached to be closer. Before I could answer, before I could even process, the sound of the front door unlocking snapped the moment in half. The sound of the front door unlocking jolted both of us. Clara's eyes shifted, not with panic, but with the kind of caution you use when you've been caught in a thought you shouldn't have. But it wasn't Matt. It was just the delivery guy, dropping off a box, barely stepping inside before he was gone again. The moment had been interrupted, but not broken entirely, like a candle flame that flickers in wind, then steadies again. Clara exhaled, leaning back in her chair. I noticed her hands, fingers laced tightly together, knuckles pale. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said quickly, then softer. "I'm fine." But I could hear something else underneath. I'd known Clara for a little over 2 years. Back when Matt and I first became friends, I'd come by to watch games, raid their fridge, crash on the couch. She was always polite, warm even, but distant in that way older adults sometimes are with people our age, keeping a line you're not supposed to cross. I'd never thought much about it, until 6 months ago. Matt had been out with friends, and I'd stayed to help Clara fix a leaking faucet. That was the first time I noticed her looking at me differently. Or maybe it was the first time I noticed myself looking back. Now, sitting here, I wondered if she remembered that night too. "You said," my voice felt unsteady, so I let the rest of the sentence die. Clara's eyes met mine, and for a second she didn't blink. "Don't repeat it," she said quietly. "Why not?" "Because some things are easier if they stay unsaid." I thought about the age gap. About Matt. about how this would look to anyone else. I thought about the last time I'd seen my own mom smile like that, before my parents split and she stopped smiling at all. Were you married long? I asked before I could stop myself. Her lips pressed together. 21 years. We were kids when we met. I think we loved the idea of each other more than the reality. Who ended it? He did. I let him. She rubbed her wrist absent-mindedly, as if the memory left a mark there. And I told myself I was fine. I didn't know what to say, so I said nothing. The rain had softened, but inside, the air still felt heavy, like it was holding onto the storm. Clara looked at me in a way that made me forget I was supposed to be careful. You're too young to understand how lonely it can get. My mouth opened, ready to argue, but instead I found myself saying, I'm not as young as you think. She held my gaze, and the seconds stretched. When she finally stood, I thought she was ending it, putting space back between us. But she walked past me, close enough that her sweater brushed my shoulder. She stopped at the counter, reached for a mug, then hesitated. Without looking back, she set it down, rested her hand lightly on my forearm, just long enough for me to feel the warmth of her skin, and then she let go. The touch was nothing, and it was everything. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the press of Clara's hand on my arm again. Not the touch itself, but the way she'd done it. Slow, like a thought she'd decided to act on without asking herself if she should. The next afternoon, I stopped by to drop off the charger Matt had left at my place. I told myself I wouldn't linger. I told myself I wouldn't even step inside. Clara opened the door before I knocked twice. Her hair was damp, like she'd just showered, and she was wearing one of those loose, soft sweaters that looked like it had been washed 100 times. You could have texted, she said, but she stepped aside to let me in. Matt's keys were on the counter. He's here, I asked, suddenly aware of how my chest had tightened. He's upstairs. On a call. She paused. You want coffee? I should have said no. Instead, I followed her to the kitchen. We didn't talk much. The air between us wasn't awkward exactly, just charged. She handed me a mug, her fingers brushing mine again. It was nothing, and it was everything, again. I sat at the table, trying to focus on the steam curling from my coffee. She leaned against the counter, watching the rain slide down the glass door. Last night, I started. She cut me off without looking at me. Don't. Why? Because he's here, she said, and then, quieter. Because I'll say more than I should. We both froze when the stairs creaked. Matt appeared in the doorway, phone still pressed to his ear. He grinned at me, mouthed hey, then turned back toward the living room. Clara didn't move until the sound of his voice faded again. You should go, she whispered. I don't want to. Her eyes flicked to mine, a split second of hesitation that almost tipped us over the edge. She stepped closer, leaning on the back of the chair beside me. The scent of her shampoo was still fresh. This is dangerous, she murmured. That's not a no. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't answer. The silence between us was thin and trembling. I could see it in her eyes, the same pull I felt, and I swear if she'd moved even a fraction closer, I would have closed the distance. Footsteps again. She straightened so fast you'd think I'd imagined it. Matt walked back in, still on his call, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. He glanced between us, but didn't linger. Clara's hands were steady as she picked up her own mug, but she didn't meet my eyes. I set my coffee down and stood, heart hammering. At the door, she finally looked at me, just one look, and I knew it wasn't over. 3 days passed without seeing her. It shouldn't have mattered. We weren't anything, not really, but the quiet felt heavier than it should. Every time my phone lit up, I hoped it was her. Every time it wasn't, I told myself that was good. Safer. Then, Saturday night, Matt texted. Movie night. Come over. I almost said no. Almost. When I walked in, Matt was in the kitchen making popcorn. Clara was at the sink, sleeves pushed up, rinsing a glass. Her eyes met mine for half a second before she looked back down, but the glass in her hand stilled. Hey, I said. She nodded without turning fully toward me. Hi. Matt came in, tossing me a beer. She's not watching with us, he said. Big stack of papers to grade. You believe that? He laughed, shaking his head. We headed into the living room. The opening credits rolled, but I couldn't focus. I kept thinking about her just a few feet away in the kitchen, the faint sound of her chair scraping as she sat down at the table. Halfway through the movie, Matt got a call and stepped outside. I didn't even think. I just got up and walked into the kitchen. She was reading something, pen in hand, but she didn't look up until I was standing across from her. "You're avoiding me," I said. "I'm protecting both of us," she replied, her voice steady but too quiet. "From what?" She set her pen down. "From doing something we can't take back." I leaned on the back of the chair opposite hers. "I don't want to be protected from that." Her eyes narrowed, but not in anger. More like she was searching for a reason to push me away and coming up empty. "You think this is simple? You're my son's friend." She broke off, shaking her head. "You're you," I said. "That's all I care about." The silence stretched. I could hear my own heartbeat in it. Then she asked, "Do you get like this with girls your own age?" "No," I said immediately. "Only with you." That made her flinch, not like it hurt, but like it landed too close to where she'd been trying not to feel. She stood abruptly, walking toward the counter, and I followed without thinking. When she turned, I was already too close. "This is wrong," she whispered. "Then tell me to stop." Her breath caught. She didn't. Her hand brushed mine as she reached for the glass behind me. Neither of us moved away. I could feel the heat of her skin, the faint tremor in her fingers. "Evan," she started, but the sound of Matt's voice calling from the other room made her freeze. We stood there, inches apart, the air between us about to break, and then she stepped back. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Clara. "Don't come over for a while." No explanation. No soft edges. Just that. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Before I could reply, Matt called. "You busy?" he asked. "Not really." "Cool. I'm at my dad's place. Can you swing by Mom's and grab the stuff I left in my room?" She said she'll let you in. I froze. She had told him to send me over? After telling me not to come? Still, 20 minutes later, I was knocking on her door. Clara opened it fast, like she'd been waiting. Her expression was tight, almost guarded. "Matt didn't tell you?" "Tell me what?" She sighed, stepping back to let me in. "Last night, after you left, he asked me if something was going on between us." My stomach dropped. "What did you say?" "That it was ridiculous," she said quickly. "And it is. It has to be." I didn't answer right away. The idea of Matt asking, the way he must have looked at her when he did, made my chest knot. Why would he even? "Because," she cut in, "we're not as subtle as we think." The words stung more than I expected. I thought I'd been careful. I thought no one had noticed. She leaned against the counter, rubbing her temples. "Evan, if he suspects, this is already halfway to over. You understand that, right?" I should have agreed. I should have said okay and walked out. Instead, I heard myself say, "So what? Are we just pretending nothing's happening?" Her head snapped up. "Yes, that's exactly what we're doing." The finality in her voice hit hard, but beneath it, I caught something else. Fear, maybe. Or regret. "I can't unhear what you said that night," I told her. "I wish you could," she said. But her eyes softened as soon as the words were out. For a moment, we just stood there, the distance between us thick with everything we couldn't say. Then she took a breath like she was bracing herself. "I made a decision," she said quietly. "I'm putting the house on the market. Moving." The ground tilted beneath me. "What?" "When?" "By the end of the summer." "That's—" I stopped, realizing I didn't even know what I was trying to say. Her voice broke just enough for me to hear it. "It's easier this way." It felt like she'd just drawn the line in permanent ink. But in her eyes, there was something else. A flicker that told me she wasn't as sure as she wanted me to believe. Somewhere down the hall, Matt's phone rang. Clara glanced toward the sound, then back at me, her lips parting like she might say more. But she didn't. I told myself I wouldn't go back after that. 2 days later, I was standing on her porch. The sky was heavy with the kind of heat that makes everything feel slower. I knocked once, then again. Clara opened the door halfway, as if she'd already decided this was going to be brief. "You shouldn't be here," she said. "I know." We just stared at each other for a long moment. The air between us was thick, pressing. I could feel the weight of everything we hadn't said, crowding the doorway. "I don't want you to move," I said finally. Her lips pressed together, her hands gripping the door frame. It's not about what I want, Evan. It's about what's safest for everyone. Safest doesn't mean right. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. You're young. You think love is worth any risk, isn't it? The question made her look away. I stepped forward, and she didn't move back. You said you've wanted this longer than I think. Was that a lie? Her throat worked before she answered. No. Then tell me to leave for the right reason. Tell me you don't feel it anymore. Her eyes met mine again, and they were too full for her words to match. I can't. The silence after that was the kind that changes things. She opened the door wider, just enough for me to step in. I don't know who moved first, maybe we both did. But suddenly, I was close enough to see the faint freckles at the bridge of her nose, to feel her breath catch. This is a mistake, she whispered, but her voice had no conviction. Then let's make it together. Her laugh was quiet, almost broken, and then her hands were on my face. Not tentative this time, certain. We kissed like the question had been burning a hole between us for months. It wasn't smooth or perfect. It was messy, urgent, human. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. We were both breathing hard. I don't know what happens next, she said. Neither do I. She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's the part that scares me. We stood there in the quiet, the decision made but the future still a blur. Outside, the air shifted, the sound of a car pulling up. Matt's car. Her hands slid from my face, lingering just a second longer than they needed to. Go, she said, her voice almost breaking. I hesitated, then stepped back toward the door. Our eyes locked one last time, a wordless understanding passing between us, that something had changed, and it couldn't be undone. When I left, she was still standing in the doorway, watching. The next week passed in fragments. A text from Matt about a party. A glimpse of Clara's car pulling out of the driveway as I drove past. An unread message I typed to her and never sent. She didn't reach out, and I didn't push. Not because I didn't want to, but because what happened in her kitchen had already said everything. The for sale sign went up on Wednesday. I saw it when I was heading home from work, the white post glaring in the sunlight. My first instinct was to turn around, knock on her door, and tell her not to go. My second was to keep driving. I did the second. 2 days later, she came to the coffee shop where I work. I noticed her the second she walked in. Hair tied up, sunglasses still on even though it was cloudy. She ordered a black coffee, but instead of leaving, she sat at the far table by the window. When my break came, I went over. She didn't look surprised to see me. I wanted to see you, she said. My chest tightened. Then why haven't you? Because, she interrupted gently. If I saw you too soon, I'd change my mind about leaving. We sat there in a kind of quiet that wasn't awkward anymore, just full. She told me the move was final. Smaller place, different part of town. A fresh start, she called it. And us? I asked. Her eyes softened. We happened. That's not nothing. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it wasn't nothing either. We talked about small things after that. Her grading, my job, Matt's plans for the summer, like normal people. But under it all, there was a thread, invisible but strong, pulling tight every time our knees brushed under the table. When she got up to leave, I walked her to the door. The sky was about to rain again, the air thick and cool. I'm not saying goodbye, she said, half smiling. Good, I said. I'm not either. She reached up, fingers brushing my cheek just once, like a final note in a song you don't want to end. Then she turned and walked into the gray afternoon. I stood there until she was gone, the space she'd left behind somehow both heavier and lighter. We hadn't promised anything. We hadn't planned anything. But I knew, the same way you know rain's coming before it starts, that this wasn't the last time.